Yeah. Now, meanwhile, Donald Trump was in North Korea and
Hanoi in Vietnam.
and excuse me, in Vietnam, anticipating a signing statement on. I guess it was supposed to happen Thursday, and that's a long way to go, essentially, to to not have that signing statement. I mean, that's a huge disaster.
And it's Bolton's fault.
And Pompeo.
I mean, my understanding is that the North Koreans actually came with, and again, you can't be moralistic in these conversations, so I'll stipulate all of the things about the horrific nature of that regime. But they came with a deal that was significant. It would have definitely downgraded their capacity in a pretty significant way. And what they wanted was for real, robust sanctions relief. And I think it's also really important to note that this has all been conducted through the South Korean president, who wants this to happen. There's a whole civil society movement in South Korea. The place where the stakes for this are highest, they want a deal. And the North Koreans came with a credible one, and Bolton and Pompeo, made the world more dangerous.
And Moon, I said last year he should have received the Nobel Peace Prize or been in consideration for his work with this. But secondly, what I think is important to note is this is what the deal that Trump was apparently prepared to take is identical to the Iran deal, basically, right? The partial denuclearization, basically getting rid of their nuclear weapons, but still having it for their power grid, and then sanctions relief. And Trump is trying to get that done, but at the same time saying the Iran deal is a terrible deal. It's purely motivated clearly by his hatred of Obama as opposed to anything substantive, which is sometimes he stumbles upon the right thing.
Well, here's the question. Was this a massive failure?
That's the question.
Wow, I don't know what that
The
happened.
soundtrack for Sam's question.
There you go.
listening.
It went a little bit too loud. Oh, of course. It was like some tab I had open with The Hill. Classic. Here's the question. Was this a massive failure by the foreign policy apparatus of the Trump administration? I mean, first of all, you do not travel to Vietnam to cancel a signing ceremony, right? Like, you just don't do that. That's just somebody totally effed up. And either the State Department apparatus and the foreign policy apparatus completely dropped the ball, or Trump was like, just get it done, forced it to go forward. I want to sign something on that day because he knew that Michael Cohen was testifying and wanted to make sure that there was some type of story, and they just weren't able to execute his unreasonable demand.
Could it be both?
It could be both. I mean, I guess it's something maybe we won't find out until we read some tell-all book about it. But this is a massive failure.
It's embarrassing. If only his constituents cared at all about peace with North Korea. I mean, we care as progressives, and we care as people who want to see peace move forward in the world. If he succeeds, his supporters will use it as brownie points, but if he fails, they don't care either. So there's no real consequences for him and his base, no matter what he does.
Well, but here's the problem, right? Is that he is not going to do this again. He's not going to go, like, the entire apparatus that arranged to have a signing statement yesterday, to have a signing of some type of accord, is now been completely illegitimized, right? Like, he'd be an idiot to listen to them. They'd be an idiot to listen to him. Like, I'm talking within his own government. So now you have a situation where they're just going to put North Korea to the side, and they're not going to pay attention to it. And every time you do that with North Korea is when you start to have real problems.
Yeah.
Because they don't like to be put into the corner.
And why would anyone, after he tore up the Iran deal, listen to him on deals of sanctions relief and nuclear disarmament? I mean, the United States doesn't keep their word.
That's that's a secondary problem. I'm not sure that how much that plays with.
Even in the context of this one, though, and not just North Koreans, are suggesting that Trump is actually lying about even the extent of sanctions relief that Kim was even asking for in the negotiations. I do think though with Iran, you're 100% right, and I do think though it's worthwhile to consider though why could Trump follow his instincts, which were good in some ways on this with North Korea. And then in addition to his personal hatred of Obama, there's a whole foreign policy apparatus set in D.C. committed to not having peace with Iran.
Right.
Which is a whole other kind of layer that doesn't apply to North Korea. But I just hope that, I was glad that Bernie Sanders embrace negotiating with North Korea. I hope the Democratic response isn't like, see, this is why we need to go back to the decades of other types of diplomacy which didn't work either. There's obviously a difference between being not knowing any details and just wanting a win, like Trump, versus let's just go back to the same arrangement that didn't work before.
That should always be the critique. That's why when he initially made these overtures, I was skeptical. Not because I think these overtures are wrong. It's just that he is woefully incompetent, and
Right.
You don't want this type of incompetence around when you're talking about a desperate regime that has a nuclear weapon. Like, you just don't want that. You don't want that floating around out there. It's just because now, there's a situation where I think it's going to get where the potential again is to get super ugly in the context of Trump cannot invest in this again now.
And what's scary is that Trump only sees consequences for himself and his immediate circle, and the
Right.
consequences don't really affect the United States. They affect South Korea and they affect Japan. And that's why President Moon, his Herculean efforts should be applauded, and why Trump's incompetence should be shamed, because there are millions of people in South Korea who will be harmed by these talks falling through.
Well, as Lindsey Graham said, though, that's over there. We're over here.
Sociopathic.
Maybe
Unbelievable.
I think Trump should pivot as quickly as possible to India, Pakistan. We need him.